Hi, listener. Before we get into today's chat on separate bathrooms, we do need to flag with you that we cover some serious themes, including child sexual abuse. If these topics raise any issues for you, please contact Lifeline on 13 11 14 or visit lifeline.org.au or contact Kids Helpline on 1800 551 800 or visit kidshelpline.com.au. These websites and numbers will also be in the show notes. If this doesn't feel safe to listen to right now, feel free to join us again next week, and we'll look forward to your company.
That experience as a child, hating yourself like I did, and just feeling so consumed by shame and guilt and fear picks you up from the path you're on in life and puts you on a very different one.
Hello and welcome to Separate Bathrooms. We would like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of this land, and pay our respects to the elders, both past and present. Hello, Cameron Daddo.
Hello, Alison Daddo. You ready for today?
I am. I'm excited to talk to these two. And as you know, we've both been reading a very potent, very important, and very special book.
The book's called You Made Me This Way. This is writer Shannon Molloy's second book. His first, 14, is an acclaimed bestseller that was turned into a hit stage show. It's being adapted for the screen right now. Shannon can write.
Sure can. His new book, You Made Me This Way, is groundbreaking. It is courageous, it's taboo breaking, and as someone wrote, Shannon Molloy's sensitivity is a gift to the country.
Let's welcome into the bathroom Shannon Molloy and his husband, Rob Battisti. All right, welcome to the bathroom, Shannon and Rob.
Thank you.
We'll get to your new book, You Made Me This Way, shortly. We'd like to get to know you both a little bit, if that's okay. We are first and foremost a relationship podcast. So tell us, how did you guys come together?
It's quite a story. The context behind it is that I just moved to Sydney from Brisbane. I only knew a couple of people here. I'd come down for a job that within a week I realised I didn't particularly love. Lived in a house that I didn't look at before I rented it, and it was just sort of horrible, falling down terrace, a block back from Oxford Street, noise all day. And so we'd met on Tinder, swiped right on each other, organised to have a date, and then I got home from this horrible day at work, feeling miserable for myself, thinking about moving back to Brisbane, and cancelled quite a sort of late time before we were meant to meet.
7 p.m. for a 7:45.
Oh,
I just thought I'm not in the headspace to meet someone. I can't turn it on tonight. And Rob wrote back a very sort of succinct message where it was clear that he wasn't pleased. Fair enough.
Yeah.
And then I felt really bad while I was having a glass of wine, and then a glass turned into 4, and I texted him and said, "Oh, stuff it. I'm on my balcony. If you want to come over and have a glass of wine, you're just down the road." And so he did, and then walked.
I was already all
me.
dressed up.
He was all dressed up.
I was going to say, so what were you getting? Did you have to come from Blacktown or somewhere miles away?
No, just around the
and you're
corner,
all dressed up,
thankfully.
and you're on the train, 7:00, and
no,
going.
he was just right there.
Right there.
Just maybe 15-minute walk. But I was at that was after 7 years of intensive dating, having tried everything from starting to the apps to going to speed dating, every type of speed dating, paid services, and then coming back to the apps and meeting Shannon on that.
Yeah.
And so Shannon's comment about me giving feedback, I was at the point where I gave feedback on every day.
Yeah. And
Here
if I
it
hadn't
is. Here's my
text back
feedback.
and said, "Come over," I don't think he would have given me a second chance. But he arrived. I was maybe on my 4th glass of wine. I changed him into my pajamas, not changed back out of them. And he comes walking down towards me, and thankfully it was a dead-end street. Otherwise he might have kept walking. And I was in my pajamas with a glass of wine. And as I saw him come towards me and, the light sort of bring him into focus, I thought, oh, God, I've made a mistake here. I should have got dressed up. he's so handsome. He's got a real presence about him, and But thankfully, I must have been a good conversationalist because we just spoke all night for hours and hours and hours, and then the rest is history. That was 9 years ago.
So without that feedback, I mean, if you had have just let it go, without the feedback, you wouldn't have gone, okay, fine, I'll come
I don't think so,
there.
no.
Yeah.
And I don't think I would have heard from you again, right?
Look, it's hard to say. I'll say yes, of course.
Yeah.
But that feedback thing, I was definitely at the point where I was drawing bad behaviour to people's awareness. So it worked in that case. Here we are. So.
And how many years have you guys actually been together?
Almost 9, married 5 this year.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So our first date was March 21.
Yeah. 2014.
Is that right?
I think so.
Yes, 2014.
Yeah.
So 5 years, that must have been right when it became legal to marry?
Yeah.
Was that about 5 years
not
ago,
long
something
after.
like that? Yeah.
So we got engaged a few years before that, before it was legal here, before it was even really on the agenda.
Right.
It didn't sort of, we'd spoken about it for a decade. It would always come up, and then the campaign would run out of steam and it would be off the agenda again. And so we weren't overly hopeful of being able to get married in Australia. So we got married in New Zealand. And then the law changed, and so we just made it a destination wedding.
Yeah.
But we landed back at home, and we were legally married.
Yeah,
So who proposed to who, and how did take us through that? How did that work?
So I proposed. It was Shannon sent a few hints over a year and a half. So he would just send me a screenshot or a link to a particular ring, just a ring.
That's so well done.
Sorry, I was going to say, so you send me links and...
Yes.
It was just like links or photos saying, this is nice. It happened, I think, 2 or 3 times, the exact same ring. It was... we're actually in Hawaii for his 30th birthday, and his friends had all decided I was going to propose there when we went out for a dinner. I took him out for dinner, and that's not my style. I'm not predictable. So,
Well, you said I would never propose to you on your birthday. Like that's too expected, particularly in a place like Hawaii. And then was it a year later?
Oh my God.
On my birthday?
yeah. So
you.
And there was fairly
I had no idea it was coming.
Well, because I wanted it to be a surprise, and like with him giving all the hints, and we'd talked about it, so it was something that was going to eventually happen. But I just sort of decided for the next 12 months I would throw him off deliberately, and just the occasional comment like, "Oh, I don't know if I want to get married now, actually, and I'm happy to be in de facto, or maybe in another year or so."
Yeah.
And it was, I think, just before a party at a pub for your birthday, when I said, like, I just want to have some one-on-one time with you beforehand before it gets all crazy. We're in Jubilee Park in Glebe. And, I eventually got to propose. His mum called just as I was about to, and
Having a great chat.
Your mum's feeling it.
She was in North Queensland, and I thought, I've got to have a good chat with Mum on my birthday, and her birthday is the next day.
Yeah, and you're chugging down the Moet.
Drinking all the champagne.
Which I was trying to save a little bit, and I kept knocking my glass over and spilling it. So eventually I just moved it more than an arm's length away. And I think it was minutes before we had to leave to meet his friends. I was trying to give signals, okay, get off the phone.
And did you actually get the ring, the right ring?
Sure
that
did.
Was it?
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Yes,
There
I
it
know.
is. There it is.
It's all sparkly.
And what was it about Shannon for you, Rob, that you knew he was the one that you wanted to propose?
Shannon, he wears his heart on his sleeve. And something I've said to him from nearly the start is that there's never any doubt in my mind about how he feels about me. So I just feel completely secure in the love that he has for me.
Yeah.
And that's, that's a very nice place to be. It's just feels, safe from an emotional perspective. So, he's handsome, he's clever, and all those other things, but it's that.
Yeah.
It's hard to describe. It's certainty.
Yeah. Yeah. How about you, Shannon?
Oh, well, looks, obviously. That's the first thing that struck me as he walked towards me. But I think it was probably our third date. We went out to a restaurant in Surrey Hills, just around the corner from both of our houses, kind of halfway. And we were sitting there talking about, work and life and whatever. And Rob started talking about his job in a children's hospital in the oncology ward, where his job is to comfort the kids that are dealing with the worst thing a child should ever have to deal with, and their parents and their family, particularly kids towards the end of their life. And he spoke with such passion and such empathy, and at one point he got a little bit teary talking about what that job means to him. And I it sounds so cliche and so silly, but I just, in that moment, I knew that I loved him and that this was it.
That's totally understandable.
Yeah. I've never met a kinder person. Oh. And it's very rare, particularly for me, I'm quite cynical at times. It's very rare to meet a person and just be so sure that there's not a nasty bone in their body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And then children.
Yeah.
Your daughter, Ava.
Child. Singular. Let's be clear, there's just one.
Just one little Ava.
Yeah, so you went through surrogacy. What was that process like? Because I've heard that can be difficult.
Yeah, and the timing was particularly difficult. I, as I said, is in the habit of giving feedback in dating and being upfront. So very early on, I think it was
couple of months in.
2 months in, I said, all right, I want to have kids. You don't have to give me an answer right now, but you have until 6 months into the relationship to be reasonably sure that you're going to move ahead with me. Otherwise, this is time wasting, basically.
Yep. I was exactly the same with Cam. I was like, not going to be with anyone that's not having kids. So, yeah. Yeah.
And it's something Shannon hadn't thought about or considered that was a possibility, whereas I was like, it's going to happen one way or another.
Yeah.
I want it. I've, used to volunteer in childcare centres and vacation care and lots of cousins, lots and lots of cousins, and just loved kids. So I was like, oh, no, I want this. And then we just eventually started looking into it. Unfortunately, in Australia, adoption's really hard just because a lot of the agencies preclude same-sex couples because they're religious based. Fostering is an amazing thing to do, and I applaud the couples that do or individuals, and it's just that there's not a lot of certainty, and unfortunately services here don't yet prioritise stability for the child.
Yeah.
It's more about reuniting with the birth parents, which makes sense from one angle, but also it's an issue with kids and stability for them. So we looked into surrogacy, and we wanted to do it right, where everyone was fully clear on the process. So we did look into it in Australia, and it's very difficult to do here because there is no judicial oversight. There is a legal process to a degree in that you might involve lawyers, but you don't have to. There's adoption orders and things you have to go through, but there's no rights for intended parents, even if you're a biological parent.
There's lots of grey when it should be very black and white from a legal sense.
Right.
And it sort of unnerved us pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So we ended up going overseas, and particularly to America.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's one thing Americans do well, it's the law.
Yep.
And so it was every scenario is mapped out. Everybody's on the same page. It's clinical at times, but you kind of need it to be before you start this incredible journey with a surrogate who's doing this wonderful thing.
Yeah.
So we ended up in America.
Yeah, and they were very transparent with us, incredibly helpful, and reassuring about everything, as Shannon said, that's happening. There's no doubt, and we wanted to have a relationship with our surrogate, which we do. She's so special to us, and we're still in contact.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Is she in America?
Yeah. So we went through surrogacy in Hawaii. Her husband's in the military, so he's since been deployed back to the mainland.
Okay.
So they've moved, but Yeah, her best friend had done it twice, and she's like, I want to do it once. I can only ever do it once because I've had 2 cesareans, and the obstetrician said only one more, and she said, I want to do it. And just such a wonderful, wonderful woman. And
Yeah, it was incredible.
yeah,
It
it's
was,
very special to us.
Yeah.
we got to know her and her family, her husband and her kids really well.
Yeah.
Which was a silver lining of the difficult timing, being that it fell right in the midst of COVID.
Right.
At the kind of maybe a year in when, you couldn't leave the country. We had to get permission to leave the country. There were a couple of flights a week to the US and they cost an insane amount of money.
Yeah, they did, didn't they?
And no direct flights to
No
Hawaii.
direct flights to Hawaii, so we had to fly to LA and then back to Hawaii, which is
Yeah.
like we're flying over Hawaii going,
Yeah.
oh, please just let us off.
There's
This
our babies down there
this
somewhere.
is torture.
Yeah.
We had to quarantine unexpectedly on arrival in Hawaii. We had all the tests, but they didn't recognise Australian labs, so we were stuck in the house for 10 days.
And that was when there were no
praying that the
cases in
baby-
Australia at the time.
Yeah, 0 cases. So it was a very uncertain time. And then because of, the health department was closed, the courts were all closed, we couldn't bring a quote-unquote foreigner back into Australia because the border was closed. So we had to make her an Australian over there and have that process done as quickly as possible, get a passport, bring her home. So we were there for 3 months.
Yeah.
In Hawaii.
In Hawaii.
On Oahu.
It's not the worst place.
It's not
Oh,
the
no.
worst place.
Pretty nice.
Rob swam every day, so it wasn't too bad, but very, very expensive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course.
So what was already a very expensive process, and we're very privileged to have been able to do that in the first place,
Yeah.
when many couples aren't, was considerably more costly.
Yeah, very much so.
But worth every penny for the most beautiful little girl that
Yeah.
we could have possibly dreamed of.
Were you there for the birth? Were you allowed to be in there for the birth?
Not in the room,
No. Okay.
but
Just outside.
Just outside.
Oh my gosh, what was that moment like when they brought her out?
Well, I thought it was my coffee. I'd ordered a coffee. And
It was very quick.
it was so quick.
20
I thought,
minutes.
Whoa, that's really quick.
I don't
Here
know
comes
anything
my
about
latte thing.
women and birth, and
Yeah.
and so I thought, knocked on the door. Great, this is my coffee, and then this, baby came in with a full head of hair, looked like a little, 40-year-old accountant.
Yeah.
Came in all bundled up, and it was just so lovely. She was,
Oh my gosh.
yeah,
Yeah, it was
incredible.
quite magical, really.
Yeah.
And
there's a photo of us, and we have masks on because you have to wear a mask at all times in the hospital. And there's no doubt about this enormous grin on our faces
Yeah.
because the eyes are just sparkling and popping. And I don't think I've ever seen myself that happy, and you can't see most of my
Yeah,
face.
right.
So it was incredible, just incredible.
Must have been amazing touching down at home
Oh,
and
such a relief.
introducing Ava to your families.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eventually, we came back to Sydney, and it was meant to be a snap 3-week lockdown or something because there'd been an outbreak, and then it was like another 3 months or something.
yeah, it was meant to finish the day that we got out of quarantine, out of hotel
And
quarantine.
then it went on for another 3 monns.
Yeah, and there's a bit of nerves as well, even coming back, because as we touched down in LA from Hawaii to come back to Sydney, there was I think a 8-hour wait. As we landed, we got the news notification that the federal government announced that they were cutting the arrival caps, but they didn't put a timeline. And it was like, is it immediate or not? Is 8 hours too long? We're going to get bumped off our flight because we heard of. Well, we'd been bumped from several flights multiple times,
I heard, yeah.
and other people as well. So,
Yeah.
well,
Like
okay.
people waiting to get on a plane, and then them saying there's not enough
Yeah.
capacity this day to get into the country, so you have to wait. And
Yeah.
families living in Heathrow for 6, 7, 8 days waiting to get on a
Crazy.
plane.
Yeah.
So that's the terror that we, the moment the plane took off, left the ground, we relaxed.
Yeah.
and
Yeah, because they
okay,
can't,
we're
they
home,
can't
we're
turn
going
the plane
home.
back.
No.
Yeah. Your book, Shannon, the 14, that came out how many years ago now?
Almost 3.
3.
Annoyingly, it came out the week of the very first nationwide lockdown of COVID. So 4-week tour out the window, no appearances, no media.
Yeah, right.
And I kind of just thought it was over before it had begun. And,
Yep.
and then thankfully, I think because everybody was cooped up and wanting to read books and go on Zoom to do readings and book clubs and that sort of thing, it just sort of it found a little audience and then took off. And
now it's become, now they're making a musical, is that
they
right?
made a play.
Made a play. Okay.
Yeah.
I keep joking about it, say, oh, they're going to do a musical. It's like, no, they're not.
There was lots of music in it. I think there were about 28 different songs from like the year 1999 and 2000.
Yeah.
So it was a great soundtrack.
Yeah.
It became a stage show, hit sell-out stage show at Brisbane Festival, and we'll tour hopefully at the back end of this year.
Congratulations.
And I read that it's being turned into a mini series or a movie.
Yeah. So the stage rights were bought as well, and when we got some money from Screen Australia to develop that, so it's been scripted and plotted and whatever, and now they're talking to broadcasters to find a home for it, hopefully. So
huge.
Yeah.
That's so exciting.
Crazy. So
Because I'm proud, like I need to mention, it's just today been nominated for 4 Matilda Awards.
the play, yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That is, I mean, that's huge.
Amazing.
I mean, that's you can't wish for more than a book. So your book becomes a play and then a series. I mean, that's fantastic.
Was that pie in the sky for you? Was that even a consideration?
No,
Yeah,
not
yeah.
at all, not at all. And even writing a book, I dreamed of this when I was a little boy. Like my first toy was a typewriter when I was 5. Like the first toy I was attached to, and
Right.
I've been typing since I was 5. I've got the repetitive stress injuries to show for it. And I dreamed, I'd write short stories and write poems and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And I just didn't think it was possible. It's such a big, mostly because I'm too lazy to sit down and write 80,000 words. But it just sort of, it happened.
Rob's shaking it off.
That's not even remotely
come on.
true.
I am lazy.
Shannon can pump out 2,000 to 3,000 words a day. You did 15,000 words in 1 week.
Because I was
Was that on 14 or was that on the
this
new
second
book?
one? This second one.
Well, it reads like that. It reads like I couldn't put it down. It was just like burning.
We both said, because the content, the content's going to be really heavy, and it's a good book when it grabs you from page 1. Your style of writing, and I've read. I'm not that I'm a know too much about books in one sense, but I read a lot of books, and it was just so beautifully written.
Thank you.
It's for such hard content, you can read it easily, and it's your style of writing is just fantastic.
Thank you.
Are you comfy to talk about it a bit?
Yeah.
Okay, so the book is You Made Me This Way, and I was just struck by how sensitively you write. It provoked a ton of thoughts for me as I was just whammed back into being in my bedroom at 5 years old. You couldn't have picked a tougher subject. I mean, I don't mean to laugh, but child sexual abuse. And as you write, I'll just read this. It's something that society struggles to comprehend and therefore chooses not to talk about. When something is too awful to think about, why would you willingly start a meaningful conversation about it? It's too hard. It's too sad. There's no messing about here. You're straight into your story. It's brave. It's compelling. It's honest as far as I can tell. And it's as honest as you can be without implicating others, right? I loved that, how respectful you were. Then you take us into a psychologist's office. You mentioned that you are in there at the insistence of Rob. What was going on for you, Rob, at that point when you said to Shannon, you need to go and go see a psychologist, being a psychologist yourself?
Yeah, well, I guess being a psychologist, I value mental well-being, and I believe in our ability to change and to overcome. And it was just very obvious to me that Shannon was hurting a lot, and it's challenging sometimes to not put on that work hat at home, and I do try really hard not to, and sometimes it slips on. And I think what I said was, you don't have to talk to me at all about any of this, but you have to talk to someone because I can see the kind of person you can be, and there's a kind of person I need in a relationship, and that also I guess would be a future co-parent. And I guess it's swinging back to earlier when I was talking about being upfront with guys I was dating, but that this is something that our relationship needs, is for you to value yourself. And you cannot do it for me. You have to decide to do it for yourself. But that's why I want you to go and talk to someone. And you never have to tell me anything that you talk about. But you can, if you want to, and I'll listen.
Yeah. And at what point, Shannon, did you decide to write the book? Had you already been seeing a psychologist? And
yeah, for quite a while, and I'd done mindfulness courses, and I'd read a lot about kind of, I guess, the human condition. And one thing that first therapist taught me was kind of a lot of answers to the question of why am I like this? I'd spent my adolescence kind of trying to be strong and trying to push on and get to a place that wasn't my small town, a place that wasn't my horrid high school. Then my 20s, I was kind of too busy living and drinking too much at parties and whatever to really confront things. And I think in your 30s, you're getting older, you're getting a bit tighter. The ability to push things down weakens. You can't can't ignore your problems anymore, your flaws.
Yep.
And if you don't address them, they kind of bubble up and get worse. And I could see that starting. Deep insecurity, feeling really sort of slighted even when I wasn't, just not really liking myself as a person. And that's not a great thing to sit with, to sit there and kind of see how much you loathe yourself. And so that's kind of what that first therapist helped me to address was, sitting there in almost every session going, oh my God, this makes so much sense now. And then beginning the process of trying to address some of those things. And once I kind of had that foundation, then talking about for the very first time in my life with him, what happened to me when I was 5. And for several years after that, and then kind of just unpacking it and realising how many other men, through my job as a journalist, how many other men felt the same way I did, how many other men had experienced something similar or worse. And despite whatever background we had, whether we grew up rich or poor, in the city or the bush, privileged or not, we all kind of ended up in this same place where, our demons had very similar faces and we were battling these horrible things and just not talking about them. And there's very little attention on it from the public because it is so horrible. And so that's kind of the basis for this book. It was me wanting to figure out more about why I am the way I am, but also to meet other men and to talk to researchers and clinicians and kind of see if I could make sense about, how we got here. And so that's the title of the book. It's,
I was I'm not shocked, but I loved what I read when you said at the beginning of the book that you were still undecided whether or not what happened to you was child abuse.
Yeah.
And then that's, in your words, that was part of what you wanted to work through in the book. How did that go?
It's a work in progress. I guess, so that first therapist, I was telling him about what happened to me and he said, how you feel and the sort of trauma responses are really common in someone who's been abused as a child. And it was the first time I'd even sort of confronted it being framed in that way. I was 5, he was an older boy who was 8. For a long time, I just thought we were both just kids that were wired wrong, doing this horrible thing, and it was shameful and wrong and whatever. But he was a kid, so how could he be a perpetrator? It's a really complex thing, and it's a really tricky part of child abuse. There's quite a number of child abuse cases. The perpetrator is another child. Usually, it's a teenager or perhaps a little bit older. And it's kind of, all the researchers I spoke to that are in this space, some with decades of experience, say we don't know how to address this. We don't. It's the last kind of taboo in this taboo-filled topic that even the experts dealing with it day in, day out don't know how to address. Like, is that child a perpetrator, or are they a victim as well?
And that's why they're perpetrating.
Yeah. And in a lot of cases it is. Not necessarily a victim of child abuse, but a victim of, a violent parent or a really dysfunctional household, and they're acting out in that way. That's the situation in my case. The boy was from a horribly violent household. But there were elements of it, the age gap, him being quite a bit older, me being quite an immature 5. Oh, that's silly to say.
5 is a little boy.
5's a little boy.
Think about 5, first graders going back to school.
Yeah,
Young
but I was
guys,
very kind of.
They're little.
I was a young 5, and that power imbalance and the kind of the manipulation that he used and the threats of keeping it quiet, those kinds of elements. At the end of this whole process, I use those to look at what happened to me as a form of abuse. But yeah, it was a tricky part of writing this book, and meeting all of these men is comparing myself to them, and it almost becoming like not a competition, but me feeling like a bit of a fraud being in this really intimate space when what happened to me wasn't as bad as what happened to them, and so it's really tricky, and I'm still not sure where I land. And indeed how I feel about this boy. I tracked him down as I write about in the book, and we spoke, and I kind of left that conversation almost feeling a bit sorry for him, and not hating or resenting him quite as much as I had.
Yeah. Did that help you?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. Initially not, because I sort of thought, who do I blame all of this on then?
Right.
But then that's kind of, for me, perhaps a little easy way out. And rather than excusing some of my bad behaviour, as I might have liked to, this is an explanation, and now the ball's in my court to address some of this, and perhaps changing how I felt about him sped that up a bit.
Yeah.
So, Rob, during the process while Shannon's in this mode of discovery, how was that for you? And I'm assuming, Shannon, that you probably shared what was going on with Rob at the time. How did you support Shannon through that time?
So you shared some of it, but the book, when I read it, the first draft was the first time I actually encountered, knew about a lot of the information, definitely the detail. Okay. So I knew what I was in store for, and because I work in that space as well.
Yeah.
I had a sense of what to expect, but it's of course different.
Yeah.
When it's in your own family, and I hope that I was supportive. That's just what I wanted to be, and I recognised that it was very important for him to do as a way of getting some control back or making some sense. Shannon's comment about is this actually child abuse? It's a hard thing when it's that age, because we see it as a natural crime, but that it's really confused when it's children, because you've got two individuals who both can't consent, but there's clearly a power imbalance. There was clearly grooming. It meets all the criteria for child abuse. It's just that the perpetrator isn't either an older teenager or an adult that you can point the finger at and go, "You're a bad person." And that's I think what Shannon struggled with, and I think I echoed what your therapist had said, was that this is child abuse. It's to do with the experience you have. It has nothing to do with the person who has perpetrated. It's about what happened to you. And I'm just very proud of him for doing this, for putting it out there, and for everything that he does and continues to do.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess looking at, the years from 5 onwards and how your life changed and turns and the struggles that you had, I mean, that lines up with someone that's been abused, hasn't it? So you could look at that and go, well, I tick all the boxes, in that sense, to know that something happened that set you on a path of reacting in the ways that you did, which trauma's trauma, isn't it? We've talked about
Yeah,
that. So,
and I think that's
yeah.
what made me much more comfortable about that kind of sticking point was that, these men that I met writing this book, what happened to us might have been vastly different, but we all felt very similar, and that's kind
Yeah.
of what inspired it in the first place. Is
Right.
it doesn't matter what happened with the abuse, it's what happened after
Yeah.
in the context of this book and
Yeah.
and how we all kind of ended up in this pretty difficult place.
It's it was just as you're talking, I imagine that in the past, experts or police or parents would just sort of fob this off as childish curiosity, just boys being boys or discovering each other.
Playing
and this is-
doctor.
that's playing doctor. There you go.
Yeah.
Just that would have been, but it's not.
No. And in fact, there are whole guides for, that these organisations who support abuse victims in childhood, they put out guides about what is age-appropriate behaviour and, this is normal, this is absolutely not for this age group. And that was really enlightening to see, and that helped me, again, sort of say, okay, well, this was not normal.
Yep.
But also I knew that at 5, playing doctor, you probably don't end that experience as a child hating yourself like I did
Yeah.
and just feeling so consumed by shame and guilt and fear and that it does. It picks you up from the path you're on in life and puts you on a very different one
Yeah.
when that's how you feel at 5.
How did your parents respond? Have they read the book?
Mum has, yeah.
How did she respond?
In a very sort of typically Irish Catholic way, where, good, yep, liked the book, I'm sorry, and then kind of we move on. My family doesn't dwell too much on the detail of things, just on loving each other and supporting each other.
Yeah.
And that's great. That's how we are. She's my best mate, and my siblings are my favourite people in the world. And I think they had an inkling, certainly not about what happened to me, but about that, suddenly throughout childhood to be very anxious about things, that I was obviously struggling with something. And
Yeah, because you talk about yourself as a really happy kid up until that age.
Yeah,
And then
and I was still happy, but very, very preoccupied with adult things like doubt and anxiety and,
Right.
being very clingy and all that sort of
Yeah.
thing. But it was great. My mum lent into that and, kind of not ignored the other 3, but gave me much more attention than the other 3. And I never questioned, whether my mum loved me. And she was always been my biggest cheerleader and supporter until I met Rob. So, but it's difficult. That was kind of the worst part, was sort of how do I... And so Rob read the draft manuscript first, was the very first person, and then I sent it to Mum at the same time before I handed it in, just to make sure that, if there's anything you want me to ditch or
Yep.
or if you don't want me to do this at all, I'll back out and so but it's tricky.
What do you want men, women, anyone to take away from the book?
I think it's kind of, you'd expect me to say this, but it's a book for everyone. It's,
Yeah, it is.
whether you've experienced abuse or someone you love has or not. I think for men who have been abused, it's kind of it's just a very basic illustration of them not being alone. What I learnt writing this book is that girls who are abused, many within several years of the abuse taking place will tell someone. Many, many more will tell someone in sort of late teens, early adulthood. Some, but a small number, will never tell anyone. For men, the vast majority will never tell anyone. The average time of disclosure is, almost 40 years. And many, many men will live with an extraordinary shame and a very heavy burden on their own. And the consequences of that are extreme. Everything from drug and alcohol abuse to family violence, to not being able to hold down a job, being in jail, and then, of course, suicide.
Yeah.
And so I think men who are abused will hopefully read this, just hopefully read it in the first place, and see themselves and feel a bit of comfort that they're not alone. Perhaps it will inspire them to speak to those that love and care about them, and ultimately to get help, because it's vital, absolutely vital. Men in general, I think, can read this book and see parts of themselves in it. In that, you know, there's a very Australian male condition where, and I don't want to use the phrase toxic masculinity because it's been weaponized, but there is something toxic about the male expectation that you have to be tough all of the time. You have to be the warrior provider all of the time. You don't give yourself permission, or you don't feel like you have permission to ever need help. And then, of course, sometimes when you do need help and you reach out, there's nothing there. So hopefully it starts a conversation about how we can better support men in this country. I think just for everybody to read it and to see the flaws and the gaps in the systems that should protect children in the first place, but then should support and care for victims afterwards. It's so flawed and so failed. And so everyone, whoever they are, will hopefully read this and not look away from the really ugly thing anymore and change the topic when it comes up, but stare at the uncomfortableness and demand change and feel passionate about changing things. All of these, everything that's horrible that's in this book, shame, doubt, you know, willful ignorance, all of that festers and thrives in the darkness, and it starts to die away when we shine a light on it.
Yeah. Beautifully said.
You had that quote, the Brené Brown quote.
Yeah, we're a big Brené Brown fans, and I always remember because she's, as you know...
Have I stolen it from her?
No, it's actually quite similar,
it's
though.
Similar sort of vibe.
Yeah, because she's a shame researcher, and she says, but if you put shame in a petri dish and you added just one drop of compassion, shame disappears.
I love that.
And
I love that.
Have you found that for yourself? Have you found the compassion?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Even one of the men in this book, I spoke to him when we spoke at length, and then he sort of just made this comment off the mark about, you know, it's to speak about it for the first time is really empowering. And I said, well, you know, he'd been in therapy for years, really leaning into his healing. I said, well, what about your therapist? What did she say? And he said, I never told her. I was the first person at 40-something that he had ever told.
Yeah.
And after our conversations, and then after him reading the draft manuscript, he told his partner, and they've started to talk about that and unpack that together. And now he's back in therapy, being really honest.
Yeah, great.
And so you're right. Once there's just a little flicker of kindness or hope, even, I think, the shadows start to disappear.
Yeah.
So.
And it's such a, you know, we hear so much about, you know, these cases where, you know, men finally do come forward and say 40 years ago, 30 years ago, my school teacher, my priest. And so that makes a lot of sense what you're saying in that timeline, and to believe those victims coming forward, because it does take so much time. I mean, women as well, though.
Yeah.
Men, you know, as you've said, and you've obviously researched it, you know, the length of time for men to feel comfortable and brave enough to come forward and say that, you know.
Yeah.
So to have compassion around that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because like you, it does take time and the pain to hold on to that stuff, to keep that lid on it. And as you said, you get older, you get the harder it is to hold the hologram up.
Yeah.
Who you are, you know, so it tends to go. You later in the book you mentioned this acceptance of being imperfect, you know, and I relate to that because I try and be perfect all the time.
You are, honey. You are.
Yeah.
You know, a question for you, Rob. Do you feel like that we sabotage ourselves? This is in your experience as a psychiatrist. Or a psychologist. I'm sorry, as a psychologist, that we sabotage ourselves trying to be perfect.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and it's one that comes up quite often with my clients. And you only have to look at advertising where slogans relate to, you know, whether you're 100% or not, and whether you're feeling your best. Or I think the latest thing is, like for men anyways, anticipating that you've got, or expecting you've got low testosterone levels in young men, which is it's just not the case.
I get Instagram ads for it.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my God, what am I?
There's lots of...
Hold on.
Especially when you've been talking about it privately and then they pop up. You know that one?
Well, we're all going to get them now because our
I've got a
phones are
few more
listening.
years,
So.
surely, yeah.
But there's so much messaging around needing to feel and be perfect, whether it's appearance or emotion or physical health, and that is not normal. So we are fundamentally flawed as people. It's how we learn. We must feel sadness. Sadness, we've evolved to have all the emotions we have. Sadness makes us stop and think and be reflective. It makes us consider actions we've done and decide, I don't like how I felt from doing that. I'm going to do that different. Anxiety keeps us safe. All of these emotions are essential, and they make us look back on the past with nostalgia and feel wonderful and awful, and it's a beautiful feeling. But we're increasingly taught that these things are bad and wrong, and they're not. Yes, they can be hijacked by mental illness. That's the way I frame it to my clients, that these very correct feelings have been hijacked. You've learned to believe that they are bad, that they're toxic. They're not. They can't hurt you. They can't kill you. That you can feel like it, but they can't actually hurt you. That you can overcome those beliefs that they feel like that they can. And it is a problem in society. And I'd like to say that there's a change, but I don't think it's so present yet. We are seeing more young people being educated, say, around mental health and mental well-being. But as I mentioned, there's just so much out there in mainstream culture around needing to be perfect, needing to be correct, not feeling bad. So the one thing I'd have to say is you're supposed to feel bad when bad stuff happens. That is how you process it and move on. You're supposed to wallow when awful things happen to you. And then, it's about finding a way forward, leaning on the supports around you, getting extra help if you need it, but talking. Like, please talk. It's so important. And on the topic of, I guess in particular, male victims of sexual abuse, something that isn't discussed because it's uncomfortable is that a big feature is that for many of them is that their bodies betray them, and that's where some of that extra shame and guilt comes from. And what I mean by that is that physiologically they might get aroused, they might ejaculate, they might feel pleasure. And so then it's this, oh, I've done this or I wanted this.
Yep.
And for a heterosexual man, that adds so much potency to what they're already feeling. Yeah.
But for anyone though, it's really damaging, and that's why it's getting past that stigma of discussing these topics, because it shouldn't happen. We need better protections for our children, and it's looking for the signs, because if a child changes, if they're different one day to the next or in a relatively short period of time, something has happened. Yeah. Might not be abuse, but there's something that's happened, and that's why schools are often the people who pick up problems at home, because the child behaves differently. And so we've got some wonderful principals and teachers out there who act on these things. But I guess to swing back to what you said, I see the search for perfection as flawed in of itself, because it's impossible and it's unhealthy. So we are flawed individuals, and that's what makes us human and, I guess, perfect in that sense.
I've never heard it put more succinctly than that.
I thought I was talking too long, sorry.
No.
Isn't it great?
No, it was great.
You've got a book coming out too, Rob.
Yeah, because that's really important to hear, that feelings. I mean, I've heard it put that if you said to a dolphin or an animal in the wild, like a lion, you can't feel those things. You know, you can't have your feelings. Well, they would die immediately. They would be preyed upon because they have all the feelings. We're the only thing that says you can't feel or you shouldn't feel. And so that's so important, I think. It's so great to hear you say that so clearly, that we're supposed to feel these feelings. And I tell you, mate, guys, I have a charity called My Men's Team, and which encourages men to come together in small teams where they can trust each other, and they're speaking in a way where they trust what's going on. They know it's not going to be blurt it out, but they can speak up what's going on, and to know that. And I will be making my guys. I'll put this up on my website, going, have a listen to this podcast, because the feelings that you are feeling, they're there to be felt. There's a purposefulness to it. Okay, I just loved it. I loved what you just said then.
Thank you.
Can I ask you both? I mean, what we're talking about is quite heady, and it's quite hard. It's heavy. Where does fun come into it for you guys in your relationship? How do you have fun?
Oh gosh. I think, well, at the moment, I'm certainly getting a lot of enjoyment from our daughter.
Yes.
It's a really fun age. She's just watching her discover the world is so wonderful. It's so wonderful. And so I think that experience together, the three of us, is really lovely. I don't know. We love to travel, although that's been a bit difficult lately. Yeah. Hawaii it wasn't a trip, but got to go somewhere and do something different.
Yeah. When no one else was. We had
Yeah, right.
different stories to tell at least.
Gosh, I don't know.
Look, people think that when someone experiences trauma that things are always bad. And so, with conditions such as post-traumatic stress disorder, so PTSD or complex PTSD, when there's other factors involved, it doesn't mean that someone is always constantly being affected. It's to do with how they get triggered in different situations or invalidated more easily when difficult things come up. So it doesn't mean that you can't feel happiness. It doesn't mean you can't be safely vulnerable with people that you trust. It's just maybe a bit more of a scary experience. And I think it's, as I said at the start, in terms of how I know Shannon feels for me, I think that love that he has, it's enabled us to explore fun, to be safe, to be vulnerable, and to have these shared experiences. And it's every day is not a heavy conversation. That's rare.
Yeah.
As it's supposed to be, but it's available when it needs to be.
Yeah, there's that safe space to have. If, your parents now, we're parents, if a parent is listening and for some reason their child is showing, I'm not going to say symptoms, but their child is demonstrating something that is alarming, like their personality is changing, they're wetting the bed, but they've, nothing that they can pick up on that they know has happened. What do you do as a parent in that situation? How do you deal with your child? Was there something that would have helped you, or what do you do in your practice, Rob?
It's, for me, it's hard to say. It was a very different time as well. It was sort of, like at that point in the kind of, the cusp of the 80s and 90s, no one would have considered therapy for,
Yeah, that's right.
even especially in my small town, I doubt there even was one.
Yeah.
But I guess I'll let you answer about what a parent should do. I imagine seek help.
Yeah, so there's a few different elements. So I guess I'm putting my clinical hat on. A very, very important thing is to not express doubt if something is said or disclosed. Don't interrogate it or investigate it. Just go to yourself, I need to get more information. I need some assistance in terms of navigating this. Because if you do suspect that something has happened, the effort, the fear that it takes for a child to disclose this, it's enormous amount of effort. It's terrifying. And so they are looking to be invalidated. They're looking for any sign, non-verbal or verbal, that you don't believe them. And so the thing I would insist on is important is that you go, okay, let's do something about this. Let's go talk to somebody. Just simple like that.
Yep.
And then, it is about finding an appropriate person. If it's a young child, you want a developmental psychologist or a clinical psychologist or a psychologist who's at least experienced in this field. That if something has just happened, you do need to go to emergency. There's going to be people who, like if it's just happened, there are services in the big children's hospitals that will help with this. But it's about understanding that it's going to be potentially a long journey, and because these things often happen within families or close friendship groups, there's going to be enormous disruption. And that's often the reason that victims don't say anything. And when I working with clients, they're so distressed about the impact on their parents if they were to. This is as grown men, decades down the path. They're so distressed around the impact they might have on their families if they say this because it's been a sibling or a cousin or an uncle or close family friend, and relationships that still exist and that are close. And so an enormous amount of bravery as a parent or guardian or teacher or aunt or uncle, anybody, to go, okay, I'm going to be there and support, and it's going to be unpleasant because it's an unpleasant topic, and our minds will discourage us from moving into that space because of how unpleasant it is. And so, as I said, an enormous amount of bravery and self-compassion.
Yeah.
I think the thing that I certainly learnt writing this book, talking to researchers and clinicians, that is so important to emphasise, though, is that early intervention is really successful, overwhelmingly successful. And so there's a huge amount of hope that if, God forbid, you're dealing with this as a family, this isn't a life sentence, you know. And again, to talk about older or victim survivors, I suppose, or men who are older, it also isn't an inevitability that this will be forever. You can heal. You can seek treatment and support. You know, the book is called "You Made Me This Way," but I guess it, you know, should underneath say "not forever."
Yeah, right.
It doesn't have to be forever. And so it is worth coming forward and talking to someone. It is worth confronting this head on if you're a parent and that's happening to a child, because like Rob said before, you can heal and grow as a person. You know, who we are isn't set in stone.
Yeah, and I just might add, with early intervention in particular with trauma, it's not like PTSD is not like other forms of mental illness that might have developed over years. It's happened following an event or events. And so there hasn't been the years of carrying the symptoms and it impacting on the development of your psyche. If it's a relatively recent thing, you can unpick the impact of that and in a lot of ways just get on with life. So it's a interesting and unique type of mental illness where if you get in quickly enough, you can very much undo the damage. That's not to say that if you haven't, that you can't. It just takes more time and effort, and it's uncomfortable, but it is absolutely possible to still have full quality of life and hope and looking forward to the future and all those things.
It's really
you're doing incredibly important, profound work, you know, and the ripple effect of this is remarkable to me. And it's we just say it's the beginning of it, though. These are the causes that you guys are making does have a ripple effect, and I'm so grateful on behalf of men that have been through this stuff. That we had a thing at one of the schools I went to where there was sexual abuse, and I know those boys, and so what you're doing on behalf of those boys and my mates who know about it, thank you. You know, it's incredible.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
really, really good. Is there anything that we've missed that you would like to say?
I guess finally it's sort of, you know, and this is how the book ends, spoiler alert, it's a grim book and it's a heavy book because that's the nature of this horrible issue. But all of the men I met who have sought help and have started to heal, you know, they have bad days like everyone, but there are many, many great days in their lives. They have great jobs, lovely families, a good support network. So again, this isn't a life sentence. It's not like, you know, you're stuck with this thing. There's always hope, I believe, and no bad day lasts forever. And so whoever you are, whatever you're struggling with, always ask for help, because it's there, whether it's a mate or a colleague or a support service or a therapist.
We thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. We do a thing at the end of the podcast where we like to have a 2-minute shower. We jump in. We keep our answers short. So you both have to answer. Well, we ask you that you both answer the question.
Okay.
Would you go first?
Sure. Okay. What is your best quality?
Empathy, I think, for me.
Yeah.
I'd say empathy for you too. I think very empathetic.
Yeah, I think I'm empathetic. Yeah.
Okay.
Caring.
All right.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. Who do you admire?
Oh, it sounds so naff, but Rob, really, I do.
Doesn't sound that.
I mean,
admire
you'd
him
expect
too.
me to say that, but it's true.
Yeah.
And my mum, I think, as well. My mum's an extraordinary woman.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah. I do admire Shannon for all the things that he's done, and it sounds like I'm copying, but
I know.
the thought that went in my mind is like it's my parents, and but I actually value people who don't walk past things that they see are wrong.
Yeah.
So that I subscribe to the standard that you walk past is the one you endorse, and so anyone who's brave takes the hard path.
I like that.
What does your perfect day look like?
Just the three of us, particularly lately. I've been very busy with this book and work and whatnot. So any day where it's just the three of us doing something that makes Ava laugh is pretty lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be the same thing. There's always things competing for attention, and we got the opportunity to go up to the Blue Mountains. A friend of Shannon loaned us her house when she was overseas. It was lovely of her, and it was just that there was no work, there was no distractions, and it was just family time.
Love it. What do you miss when you're not together?
I fret whenever Rob's away, even if it's for a night. And so I sleep on his side of the bed that night and use his pillow. Really awful stuff. I used to put one of his T-shirts on the pillow. Anyway, I think
Elle does that too.
His comfort, I think. I just feel really reassured when he's around.
This will also sound naff in a different way. Because of how sure I am in terms of how Shannon feels, I feel him with me wherever I go. So,
oh my God. Now my answer sounds crap.
Oh.
Well, it's just that as I said, that surety that I know that he loves me. And so it sounds bad to say that I do quite okay when I'm away from home because I carry the relationship with me. And I love being at home as well, but I don't feel apart.
Yeah, you don't feel the missing because he's with you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. All right, last question. Can you describe each other in one word? And if you need more than one word, it's okay.
Extraordinary.
God. Oh, dear. I've used it a few times. Brave.
Brave. Shannon Molloy, Rob Battisti, thank you so much for coming in. Can I just read this last thing because I just love this. You wrote, Shannon, to anyone who is struggling, I say, a new dawn always follows even the darkest night. You are never alone, even if there's not a soul you feel you can talk to, even if you believe in the moment that there's no one who loves you, who believes you, who cares. There is, and they will. Speak up when you're ready, and don't believe the things your demons tell you. You can do this. You can survive. I believe you.
Thank you both so much for your time and your love and your care for each other and for everyone around you. It's really inspiring. So
thank you.
Thanks
and thanks for having us.
us.
This has been really lovely.
thank you.
Thanks, man.
I am a bit speechless. I feel like I want to sob is one thing I feel right now, just from the beauty and the kindness and the care and the potency of what they both spoke about, and how beautifully and eloquent they both spoke as well. That was a chat and a half.
Amazing. I know I said everything. I feel like I left everything out there on the floor. My throat could just feel emotion getting caught.
Yeah.
Just so, as you say, so kind, and the message that Rob gave about our feelings are all valid. We're supposed to feel all these different feelings.
When something bad happens, you're meant to feel bad.
Yeah. So allow that to happen.
Yeah.
And support someone in it. Oh, it just was so good. I do hope you, listener, got as much out of it as we did.
You Made Me This Way is the book. I just highly recommend it. Yes, the content is hard, but the heart that writes it is so beautiful, and it's such an amazing read. And it does have empowering notes in it. It does have, so much love built into it as well. So, and I think it's an important one to read if you know of anyone who is suffering through trauma. There's help in there for you, as well as someone who might be on the sideline of that. So, highly recommend it.
All right, that's us for this week. We will catch you on the next one. If you get a chance to rate us as well on the whatever platform you're listening to, we'd really appreciate it, because it helps get the word out. And I think for messages like what Rob and Shannon just delivered, the broader it is, the better it's going to be for all of us. So get on it.
Thanks for listening.